Imagine the scene. You're standing in the throne room, surrounded by the most powerful men in the kingdom. Your husband just gambled you away in a game of dice, and he lost. Now, men you considered family approach you with intentions that go beyond any nightmare. This is not fiction. This is recorded in one of the oldest scriptures of humanity, the Mahabharata. And what happened that day changed the course of history forever. Welcome to Dharma Diaries. Today, we're diving into the story of Draupadi, the woman who was bet like an object and became the reason an apocalyptic war swept across the land. Before we get into the twisted game, you need to meet the protagonist. Draupadi was not an ordinary woman. She was born from fire, literally. According to the Mahabharata, she emerged from a sacrificial ritual already grown with beauty that outshone the stars. Her father was performing a yagna, a sacred ritual, when from the flames emerged two figures, a man and a woman. The man was Drishtadyumna, destined to be a great warrior, and the woman was Draupadi. But here comes the detail that shocks many people. Draupadi was married to 5 men simultaneously, the 5 Pandava brothers, Yudhishthira, the eldest and king, Bhima, the strongest warrior, Arjuna, the legendary archer, and the twins Nakula and Sahadeva. 1 wife, 5 husbands, palindri. And no, this wasn't common even back then. How did this happen? Arjuna won her in a Svayamvara, a competition where the bride chooses her husband. He hit an impossible target that no other king or prince could manage. When he came home excited, he shouted to his mother, Kunti, "Look, mother, at the prize I won today." Kunti was busy cooking with her back to the door, and without looking responded, "Then share it among the 5 of you, as you always do." When she turned around and saw Draupadi, she was horrified. But the word had been spoken, and in Sanatana Dharma, a mother's word is absolute law. It cannot be broken. Draupadi became wife to all 5 brothers, the queen of the most prosperous kingdom of the age, respected, admired, protected by the 5 greatest warriors who ever walked the earth. Or at least that's what everyone thought. The Pandavas had cousins, the Kauravas, 100 brothers, led by Duryodhana, the eldest. And between these 2 families there was a rivalry that went back to birth. Duryodhana believed the throne should be his, not Yudhishthira's. He envied everything the Pandavas had, the prosperous kingdom of Indraprastha with its magical palace, the unwavering loyalty of the people, the respect of sages and warriors, and especially he envied Draupadi. Once, Duryodhana visited the Pandavas' palace. The palace was an architectural marvel built by the divine architect Maya. It had illusions everywhere, floors that looked like water and water that looked like floor. Duryodhana, confused, walked straight into a pool thinking it was solid ground and fell in. Wet and humiliated, he heard laughter.
Draupadi was laughing at him. She let slip a phrase that sealed her fate. "The blind man's son is blind," a cruel reference to Duryodhana's father, who was born blind. That burned in Duryodhana's soul like red-hot iron. He returned home consumed by hatred and began planning the perfect revenge, not with swords or armies, but with something far more subtle, a game of dice. Yudhishthira had a fatal flaw. He was addicted to gambling, completely. When the dice rolled, he lost all reason. He was incapable of refusing a challenge, and everyone knew it. So, Duryodhana, with the help of his uncle Shakuni, set up the perfect trap. Shakuni was a master manipulator. He had special dice, dice made from the bones of his own father, dice that obeyed only him, dice that never lied. They always fell exactly as he wanted. The invitation was sent,
a friendly game between cousins, an opportunity for reconciliation. Yudhishthira could not refuse. It was a matter of honor. Even knowing about his addiction, even with his brothers begging him not to go, he went. The throne room was packed. Kings, warriors, sages, elders. Everyone came to witness the game. On the Kaurava's side were Duryodhana and his 99 brothers, Bhishma, the patriarch of the family and most respected warrior of the age, Drona, the weapons master who trained both Pandavas and Kauravas, Kripa, another sage and warrior, Karna, Duryodhana's best friend and Arjuna's rival. On the Pandavas' side were the 5 brothers, uncomfortable, tense, knowing something was wrong but unable to act. Shakuni smiled, picked up the dice, and the game began. First round, Yudhishthira bet his most precious jewels, lost. Another round? Second round, he bet his golden chariots, lost. Another? Third round, he bet his horses, lost. Another round, Yudhishthira? The room was in tense silence. It was obvious something was wrong. Shakuni's dice always fell perfectly, but no one dared accuse a guest of cheating. It was against Dharma, and Yudhishthira kept playing, blinded by addiction. He lost his lands, lost his gold mines, lost entire cities, lost his kingdom. Indraprastha, the most glorious kingdom, now belonged to the Kauravas. But Yudhishthira couldn't stop. The addiction consumed him. And then Shakuni whispered the diabolical suggestion, "You still have more things of value, Yudhishthira. Your brothers are great warriors. Bet them." The room exploded in murmurs. This crossed every line. Betting people. But before anyone could intervene, Yudhishthira had already accepted. First, he bet Nakula, the most handsome brother, lost. Shakuni smiled. Another round? Yudhishthira bet Sahadeva, the wisest of the brothers, lost. Another? He bet Arjuna, the greatest archer who ever lived, lost. Another? He bet Bhima, the strongest man on earth, lost. 4 brothers, 4 legendary warriors. Now they were slaves of the Kauravas. Bhima was trembling with contained rage. Arjuna had tears in his eyes.
Nakula and Sahadeva looked at the floor in shame, but they could do nothing. The game was still happening. Shakuni looked at Yudhishthira. "You can still save yourself. Bet yourself. If you win, you get everything back." Yudhishthira picked up the dice with trembling hands and played. Lost. The 5 Pandava brothers were now property of the Kauravas, slaves, without rights, without voice. The room was in silent shock, but Shakuni wasn't finished. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with malice. "Yudhishthira, you're no longer owner of yourself. But technically, there's still one thing that can be bet, something that hasn't been mentioned yet." Everyone knew what he was talking about. Duryodhana smiled. Dushasana, the second Kaurava brother, licked his lips in anticipation. Bet Draupadi. The air left the room. How could a man who had already lost himself bet another person? He had no authority anymore. He had nothing. But Yudhishthira was completely lost. Addiction blinded him. He didn't even think. He picked up the dice and played. The dice rolled in slow motion. They fell, and Draupadi's fate was sealed. Draupadi now belonged to the Kauravas. Bhishma, the great patriarch, closed his eyes. He knew something terrible was about to happen. Drona looked away. Vidura, the wise and just uncle, tried to protest, but was silenced. No one had the courage to face Duryodhana at that moment. Duryodhana looked at his brother Dushasana. "Go get her." Dushasana left the hall with heavy steps. He knew where Draupadi was, in her private chambers, menstruating,
in a period considered sacred in Hinduism, where women must remain isolated, in peace, undisturbed. It was law. It was basic respect. He invaded the room without asking permission. Draupadi was surprised. "What are you doing here, Dushasana? It's forbidden." Dushasana laughed. "Forbidden? You were bet in a dice game, Draupadi, and lost. Now you belong to us, and slaves have no right to privacy." Draupadi was in shock. "Bet? How? By whom?" "Your husband, Yudhishthira. He threw you in the dice like you were a coin, and lost." Before Draupadi could process that, Dushasana advanced. He grabbed her long black hair. In Hinduism, a woman's hair is sacred. Touching it without permission is one of the greatest possible insults. And he didn't just touch it. He pulled, hard, and began dragging her through the corridors. Draupadi screamed, tried to break free, but Dushasana was strong. He dragged her through the entire palace, through marble corridors, past horrified servants, past guards who looked away, all the way to the throne room, and threw her on the floor like a sack. The queen, dragged by her hair, thrown on the floor in front of the entire court. Draupadi raised her head. Her eyes were burning. She looked at her 5 husbands sitting with heads down. "Are you going to allow this?" Silence. Bhima trembled with rage but didn't move. Arjuna had tears streaming but remained seated.
Yudhishthira looked at the floor, consumed by shame. Draupadi looked at Bhishma, the great Bhishma, invincible warrior, man of Dharma who vowed to always protect justice. He was practically a grandfather to her. "Bhishma, are you going to allow this?" Bhishma closed his eyes. "I cannot interfere, Draupadi. Technically, you were bet legally. I cannot break the rules of the game." She looked at Drona, her master, the man who taught the Pandavas and herself. Drona looked away. "I can do nothing." One by one, she looked at all the great men in the room, kings, warriors, sages, men who swore to protect Dharma, men who called themselves noble. Not one stood up. Not one said a word. Duryodhana was savoring every second. He looked at Draupadi and slapped his own thigh obscenely, a sexual gesture, maximum disrespect. "Come sit here, Draupadi. Now you're ours. You can choose which of us 100 brothers you want to serve first." The room was in shock. This crossed every boundary of decency, but no one moved. Then Duryodhana gave the order that would change everything. "Dushasana, she's wearing expensive clothes, queen's clothes, but slaves don't wear silk. Take those clothes off her, here, now, in front of everyone." The silence that fell over the room was deafening. Stripping a woman publicly, this wasn't just humiliation, it was total destruction. In Hinduism, a woman's honor is sacred. Violating it this way was worse than death. Dushasana approached. Draupadi stood up, staggering. She held her sari with both hands, with all the strength she had. "No, you're not going to do this." Dushasana laughed. "You have no choice." He grabbed the edge of the sari and began pulling. Draupadi fought. She held the fabric with tooth and nail, but Dushasana was much stronger. He pulled meter after meter of fabric, laughing. The other Kauravas were laughing too, clapping, encouraging. Draupadi screamed. She begged, looked at her husbands one last time. "Are you going to let this happen?" All 5 were crying but didn't move. Slaves cannot challenge their masters. Draupadi's strength was running out. Her hands began to slip. The sari was being torn away. In seconds, she would be naked in front of hundreds of men. It was at that moment something changed inside Draupadi. She realized no man in that room was going to save her. Not her husbands, not the sages, not the warriors, no one. She was completely alone, surrounded by men who called themselves Dharma but were cowards. So she did the only thing left. She released the fabric,
stopped fighting, raised her arms to the sky, closed her eyes, and with a broken but firm voice called out to the only one who could save her. "Krishna, Krishna, Govinda, Madhava, Lord of the universe, if you are real, if you consider me your friend, save me, save my honor, because no man here is going to do it." Tears fell from her eyes, but her faith was unshakable. "Krishna, please." And Krishna, who was in Dwarka, hundreds of miles away, heard.
Dushasana continued pulling the sari, pulling with all his strength, meter after meter of red fabric piled on the floor. But something strange was happening. The sari wasn't ending. Dushasana pulled harder, more fabric. He pulled until he was sweating, more fabric. Pulled until he was tired, more fabric. The pile of saris around him grew and grew, but Draupadi remained covered. Somehow, the sari had become infinite. The room went into panic. What's happening? Is this witchcraft? Dushasana pulled until his hands bled, until he collapsed from exhaustion, a mountain of red fabric around him, and Draupadi, standing in the center, completely covered. A miracle, a divine miracle. Krishna had answered when no man did. But Draupadi wasn't relieved, wasn't grateful. She was furious, a fury that burned hotter than the fire from which she was born. She looked at the room full of cowardly men, and with her hair still loose, symbol of dishonor, she made an oath. "Listen well, all of you. I will not tie my hair. I will not oil it. I will not braid it. Not until I wash it in Dushasana's blood. His blood will wet my hair, and only then will I tie it again." The room went ice cold. A blood oath, made publicly. In Sanatana Dharma, this cannot be undone. Bhima, the second brother, finally exploded. He stood up with eyes red with hatred. His voice thundered through the hall. "I also make an oath. I will tear off that arm that touched Draupadi. I will tear it off in war. I will open Dushasana's chest, and I will drink his blood." In the war that followed, he actually did it. He tore off Dushasana's arm, opened his chest, and drank the blood while he was still alive. Arjuna stood up. "I swear to kill all 100 Kauravas. None will survive." Of the 100 Kaurava brothers, not a single one survived the war. Not one. Nakula and Sahadeva made their own oaths. Yudhishthira, consumed by shame, swore he would never touch dice again. But the damage was done. The elders tried to calm things down, tried to negotiate. Vidura begged for peace, but the oaths had already been made, and blood oaths cannot be broken. An agreement was made. The Pandavas would be exiled for 12 years in the forest, and 1 year incognito. If they were discovered in the 13th year, they would have to start all over. 13 years away from home, 13 years of humiliation. During all that time, Draupadi kept her hair loose. She refused to tie it. Every day was a reminder, for her husbands, for the world. The blood debt had not yet been paid. 13 years later, they returned, stronger, wiser, more dangerous. They asked for only 5 villages to live in peace. They didn't want war, didn't want the kingdom back, just 5 small villages for the 5 brothers. Duryodona's answer echoed through the halls. "I will not give the Pandavas even the space that fits on the tip of a needle, not even that." Draupadi heard that, and for the first time in years, she smiled.
An ice-cold smile. She knew war was now inevitable, and she was the reason. Not for empty revenge, but for justice, for dharma, for dignity that was trampled when all the great men fell silent. Krishna tried to negotiate peace, went personally as an emissary, offered generous terms. But Duryodhana tried to imprison Krishna himself. It was the final mistake. The War of Kurukshetra became inevitable. 18 days of battle that would kill millions. The greatest war the ancient world ever saw. And at the center of it all, the reason peace was impossible, stood a woman with loose hair who refused to forget. Draupadi didn't take up arms, but she was the one who lit the fire. It was her humiliation that made any reconciliation impossible. It was her oath that sealed the fate of an entire generation. She became the force that moved gods and men to war.
Final reflection. Draupadi's story teaches us something profound about human nature, about how the silence of good people can be as destructive as the actions of the bad, about how dignity is not something someone can take from you, only you can surrender it. And Draupadi never surrendered it. This 5,000-year-old story resonates today. How many times do we stay silent when we should speak? How many times do we look away when we should act? How many Draupadis exist today, crying out for justice in rooms full of men who call themselves noble? The Mahabharata is not just an ancient story, it's a mirror, and sometimes the reflection we see is not pretty at all. This was just the first part of a much larger saga. In the next videos, we're going to see what happened in the war, how each oath was fulfilled, and the price everyone paid for victory. If this story moved you in any way, leave down in the comments what impacted you most. Like the video, but only if it was really worth it. If something bothered you, or if you think I could have told it differently, comment that too. I read everything, and I love when people share their perspectives. And if you want to continue this journey through Sanatana Dharma, through stories most people don't know, stories that are brutally honest about human nature, consider subscribing to the channel. There's much more coming. I'm David, and this was Dharma Diaries. Namaste.